Brian here with Wayfaller Fellowship. I'm sporting the new shirt, Celebrate Recovery shirt. Just got done with my Celebrate Recovery meeting, and it's a good meeting. Always love going there. And I go to a small group there. They have small share groups there for veterans, and I'm a veteran, so I go to that. It's called Welcome Home. But they have other groups. They have groups for addiction, life issues. They separate it between men and women, so they can have talk about things that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable talking about in this company, which I think is fantastic. And then first there's worship, then there's the small groups, and then there's there's worship, and then there's either a lesson or a testimony. Once a quarter we do a celebration night where we celebrate people's anniversaries for their whatever it is that their struggle is with, has been with, and all that. It's a great time. After the small group, then there's what we call Solid Rock Cafe. Just a time for fellowship. We can hang out, have some snacks, and just kind of chit chat with each other and see how everybody's doing. So, if anybody's looking for a place to go for support, non-judgment, people who genuinely care because they get it, they've been there, they understand. I can't recommend Celebrate Recovery enough. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we've got tons of Celebrate Recoveries. I go to the one at Central Bible Church. You're welcome to come and check it out and hang out and see what it's all about. If you're not in the DFW area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I bet you there's a Celebrate Recovery somewhere near you if you're in the United States. I'm not sure about internationally, but you can always look into it. And if there isn't one, maybe you can get in touch with Celebrate Recovery leadership and see about making one for where you're at. Starting one up, your local church and local pastors, and see if they can help support you in the ministry. And maybe that's your calling. Maybe that's something that you should look into, and possibly something that you can do. So, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is I actually want to talk about Dahmer. So, he's been in the news a lot recently because of the new Netflix TV series about him. It's kind of a biopic, sort of TV show about him. Of course, they take some liberties with some certain things for artistic value and whatnot. But one of the things that I found very interesting, I haven't seen the series, but from those who have seen the series, again, shout out to my guy Ruslan. He did an episode on Dahmer, which is kind of the inspiration for this episode. I wanted to talk about it a little bit from my perspective. And then, of course, What Do You Meme? What Do You Meme did he's another YouTube channel. He did one, or actually sat down with the pastor who pastored Jeffery Dahmer. And so having seen those, I kind of, wanted to keep a little bit of my perspective on the idea, because I think it's going to be important in the days to come that people are going to ask Christians, and they already have asked Christians, they believe that Dahmer is in heaven. And that's a very, very uncomfortable question for many people. Very touchy subject. It's like asking, do you believe in a God that could forgive Adolf Hitler? Do you believe in a God who could forgive Mao or Stalin or, Genghis Khan or, Alexander the Great? Could any of them be forgiven for the sins and the atrocities that they committed, on the world? And the answer is simple. Yes. I mean, it may maybe not be the answer they want to hear, but yes, God can forgive all of that. Now, I mean, I wasn't there, when Dahmer got saved, when where he, proclaimed that he was saved, and, that he was baptized in obedience to the scriptures and all these things. So I can't really speak to his personal salvation. Never had the chance to converse with him and talk with him and find out what he believed, what he didn't believe, or anything. And really, I don't think that's the point. Right? That's not really the point of the question. The question that when that question comes up is a question where people are trying to see if God fits in our definition of justice. Can we stuff God into the box of human justice? What we feel is right? And the answer is no. If God were that type of God, if that was his kind of justice, there would be no hope for anyone. No hope for anyone. There's only one unforgivable sin in the Bible that is spoken of, and that is the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. So, short of that, anything and everything can be forgiven, and that's amazing, really. If you think about it, that if somebody as bad as Jeffrey Dahmer, somebody who commits the atrocities of Jeffrey Dahmer or the atrocities of Mao and Stalin and all these other horrific people in the world who have done horrible, horrible things, if they can be forgiven, you can too, right? That's the beauty of the gospel. That's the what's amazing, what's unique, right? That's what's unique about following the way. Unique about Jesus is no other faith that I'm aware of, correct me if I'm wrong, no other faith that I'm aware of believes in that type of grace. That our God would come down to us. He would make himself into a man and take on our punishment that we rightly deserve. That, the just thing, according to, human standards, would be that we would face that punishment. Because we're the ones that are wrong. We're the ones making poor choices. We're the ones, living outside of, the law. And, so that's, one of the, like I said, one of the unique things about Christianity that I think you'd be hard pressed to find in any other religion. Every other faith that's out there, there's works required, right? As far as the Christian, worldview, the Christian faith goes, it's all grace. It's by faith. It's not how good or how bad you are. That's not a qualifier. Now, don't get me wrong. The Bible does talk about your reward in heaven. The thing that, how God will reward you in heaven. And that'll be based on how much of your works here on earth, glorified the kingdom and glorified him and spread, made his name hallowed, right? Hallowed be his name, made his name famous. So, that was a little, kickback to the Lord's Prayer video. If you haven't seen it, feel free to check it out. But the thing is, I love that I believe in a God that can forgive the worst of the worst, because that means he can forgive me too, right? He can forgive you, and he can forgive anyone. It doesn't matter if you're a murderer. It doesn't matter if you're a thief. It doesn't matter if you're, embezzling your company's money, or if you're sleeping around on your wife, or your wife is sleeping around on you. It doesn't matter if you're addicted to drugs, or addicted to alcohol. Like I was addicted to alcohol, and I found freedom in Jesus, and reconnecting to, the one true God. And so, yes, the answer is yes. The simple answer is yes. God can forgive and could have possibly forgiven Jeffrey Dahmer for his sins. And that may seem unjust on the face of it, because we as humans find, Dahmer's actions to be so abhorrent, so disgusting. But God, he died for those sins too. Jesus died for those sins too. And so there's a beauty in the idea that if Jeffrey Dahmer truly believed in his heart and spoke with his mouth that Jesus is his Savior and his Lord, then yes, it's very possible his sins were forgiven and that he's in heaven. And I think that that's a good thing, because, if God were petty enough that, he would only forgive some people but not others in that sense, then, that's kind of, that kind of reminds me of, the gods of mythology, the Zeuses and the Odins and, these other gods that are out there that they would just pick and choose, right? They would just pick and choose who is saved and who isn't. I mean, when you look at the Muslim faith of today, in Islam, look at Islam, there may be some modicum of grace in that faith, but ultimately you have to work for your salvation. You have to follow the Quran. You have to follow the Islamic law. You have to follow these things, which is more akin to Old Testament Judaism, right? The Old Testament Judaism was all about the law, following the law, doing the law, and being confined into these laws. And so there's more, in common with that, those two religions than there is with Christianity, even though Christianity was birthed from Judaism, and it was the fulfillment of Jewish law. Jesus died on the cross, and he came down, just as the prophet said, Isaiah and Daniel said that he would come, and he fulfilled the prophecies of the Old Testament. And so then he freed us, from the consequences of sin. The wages of sin is death, right? So, he's freed us from that. That doesn't give us a license to do whatever we want, and we'll talk about that in an upcoming video. But yes, I mean, I am grateful for a God who is that forgiving. Because if somebody like that can be saved, who couldn't, right? Who couldn't be saved? There's no one so bad enough that they couldn't be saved. In fact, I want to talk about Paul. The artist formerly known as Saul, right? So before Saul became Paul, Saul was one, he was a very religious man. Very, very, very religious. He believed in the law. He believed in Judaism. He believed, in God, and all these things. And he believed, he was given an edict, right? He was given a mission from the religious leaders of his time that he was to go out and kill Christians. That's it. I mean, that was his job. He was in his mind, he was a holy executioner, right? Like he thought that he was on a mission from God, that he was supposed to snuff out these Christians because they were blaspheming the word. And the thing is he killed many, many, many Christians. Whether they were Jew or Gentile, he killed Christians. I think most of his, probably focused on Jewish Christians, but, his edict was to kill Christians. And so he did. I don't know how many he killed, but I imagine it was more than Dahmer, right? He took mothers, he took fathers, he took, sons and daughters, uncles and aunts, grandfathers and grandmothers. He killed them. Now his motivation might have been different, right, than Dahmer's, but Paul murdered. Think about that for a second. Saul, who became Paul, Saul was a murderer. I mean, if anybody did what he did today, there's no question he would end up on death row, killing somebody for their beliefs. I mean, that's abhorrent. That's disgusting. That's reprobate. I mean, it's not honorable, right? We don't see that today as an honorable thing to kill somebody for what they believe. Yet he did it. He would have been on death row, and I imagine they would have probably fast tracked him. given the number of people he probably killed. I mean, this is speculation, of course, on my part, but God forgave him, right? I mean, he was on the road to Damascus, on his way to kill more Christians. He was heading to Damascus to slaughter as many Christians as he could find. And so, on the way there, he's riding his donkey, and the donkey stops. And he's not going anywhere. He's not moving forward. And he's kicking it, and he's yelling at it, and he's beating it, saying, "Why aren't you moving? Why aren't you moving?" And then God opened the donkey's mouth and allowed the donkey to speak. And the donkey looked at him and said, "Don't you see what's in front of you?" This is a paraphrase. "Don't you see what's in front of you? I'm not my path is being blocked." And that's when God opened Saul's eyes. And he looked and he saw Jesus, saw the Son of God right in front of him in all his glory. And Jesus asked him, why does he persecute his people? Why is he killing his people? And, again, this whole thing is a paraphrase. But, then he blinded Saul and told him to continue on his journey. And then when he gets to Damascus, there was, a specific Christian there that he was supposed to meet with. And so he met with that Christian, and as they were talking, his sight was restored. And so, on his journey to becoming Paul, he committed great sin. And he acknowledges it. I mean, he says in his own writings, in his own letters, that as far as sinners go, he's the worst. Like, he admits, I am the worst among you. And the reason why he says that, the reason why he believes that he's the worst, is because he was raised in faith. He had the scriptures in front of him. He knew the Old Testament. He knew the Torah. He knew the prophecies. He knew the things that would herald the coming of the Messiah. And instead of heeding to that stuff, he decided that he was going to have righteous indignation and pride in that this man could not possibly be the Son of God. And so therefore, everybody who believes he is blaspheming God and deserves death. And he says later that, he's talking about how wretched, a person who was, that he had it in front of him. He had the knowledge, but he was so closed off from the truth. He felt like he had no excuse for the actions that he did. Even if at the time he felt justified, looking back, he realizes what the truth is and that he had no excuse because he had the truth the whole time. Right? So if somebody as bad as Paul can be saved, not only saved, but become a pillar of the church, somebody who the church looks to for guidance, for answers, for wisdom, for knowledge about salvation and God and the human condition and all these things, why wouldn't he be able to forgive Dahmer, Mao, Stalin, if they truly chose to accept Jesus as their Savior? I mean, yeah. You may not like the answer. Somebody who asks you the question may not like it. But the truth is, it is amazing that we have a God who wants a relationship with us so bad that he would put himself through torture, torment, pain, death. He would take on, not just that he died, but he would take on the sins, past, present, and future, the sins of all of humanity, and carry that with him into death to pay the price that we should have paid. He lived the life we couldn't live. He died the death we should have died. so that we could have the reward we don't deserve. And that reward is salvation. So yeah, it's possible. Dahmer could be in heaven right now. And, if you're on your way there, if you're a Christian, and, you're following the way, then it's very possible that you might meet him someday. I imagine that if any of his victims are in heaven, again, this is me just speculating, but I imagine that if any of his victims are in heaven, they're probably, and I know this is not going to sound, comforting to some people, but I imagine they're celebrating his salvation. Even his victims, if they're in heaven with him, I bet you they welcomed him with open arms and they were glad to see him. No? Because it's a joyous thing when somebody accepts Jesus. The angels sing. They're ecstatic in heaven when another person comes to Jesus and somebody, has accepted the gift of God. So, yeah. So, if you disagree with me, if you have any questions about why I believe this and why I think it's actually a good thing and actually a beautiful thing, if you need some clarification on anything that I've said, or even if you disagree with me, I mean, let's hash it out. Let's talk it out. Let's get in the comments and let's say some stuff and let's just keep it respectful. Let's not use insults, profanity, or anything like that. But let's talk about it. Let's find out what's going on, within each of us that if this answer is an answer that makes you mad, why? Let's talk about it so we can, figure out. And if I'm wrong, if you can show me that I'm wrong, I welcome it. I'm happy to look and listen, to your point of view. Absolutely. We'll get there. So, I hope that this was, at least somewhat helpful, for some. If it made you upset or uncomfortable, I'm sorry, that happened, but I think it's important that we know the God that we serve and that we can answer with confidence that he loves and forgives, those who choose to accept that gift. So please like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends. Hit that bell notification button. Let's get the word out. Let's continue to share with love and continue to share with patience and kindness, not out of anger or frustration. Love. They will know you are Christians by your love, right? So let's do that. All right. I love you. Go with Christ.